This episode is brought to you in partnership by Clay Cooley Automotive, family-owned, family-operated automotive company serving the local DFW Metroplex for over 22 years. Clay, thank you for all you're doing to make intersections possible. Welcome to Intersections, where we take a multi-generational look at the critical issues facing America. Tom, this is going to be really fun.
This is going to be a great conversation, a little bit different than some of the other ones that we've done. Randall Wallace. Randall is known as a screenwriter, a producer, a director of some of the most known films over the last 30 years or so. In addition to being a songwriter, we're going to have a great conversation. Randall, we appreciate you being here.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. This is home to me. Even though I haven't lived in Dallas, Texas is my peeps.
You know, you're well known for movies like Braveheart, Man with the Iron Mask, Secretariat, We Were Soldiers, and the list goes on and on for that standpoint. But that's looking at your background. That's not where you look like you were going to go. Grew up in Tennessee, moved to Virginia for school. Give us a sense of growing up in the South and your family and how that led eventually to getting into being probably one of the most recognized storytellers in Hollywood.
Well, my family are West Tennesseans, and my father's from Lizard Lick, Tennessee. The men in my father's family are Alton, Elton, Dalton, Lyman, Gleeman, Herman, Thurman, and Clyde. And they grew up extremely poor. The echoes of the Civil War were still in the South then because the homes had been destroyed, the economy had been destroyed. They came from smart people, but there was a lot of poverty, the Depression. Yeah. My father's father died before he was born, and that in fact would play into my history because my father didn't know his father. But he would take me to the graveyard at this stone that had Wallace on it and say, this was my daddy, and I never got to know him. And that connection of wanting to know who the Wallaces were was what would eventually lead me to
I know that explore well.
And my mother was super smart, skipped 2 grades in school, but they didn't get a chance to go to college. And I got to go to Duke, when I finished school, I went to seminary. I majored in religion. Mm-hmm. I never...
And Russian studies and literature on top of it, correct?
Yes. I'm getting uncomfortable that you've really researched my background. You know more about me maybe than I... But yes, I was really into Russian. It was fascinating to me that somebody who lived 150, 200 years ago on the other side of the world could know my soul. That was intriguing to me. My teachers were survivors of the siege of Leningrad, and I was enthralled by them and by the literature that they taught me. But religion seemed to me the purest science of the human spirit. Like if you know what someone...
Your mother and father were strong Christians?
Yes. Oh, yeah. They had founded churches. The church they grew up in had been founded in my grandmother's living room in her farmhouse. We're Southern Baptists. The music was powerful. I was in church all the time. In fact, my sons have said to me, the amount of church you were in was like child abuse. It's like so many hours in church because we would have tent revivals and there'd be morning and evening services and all that. And yes, as a child, it was hard to sit still, but I heard Bach and Beethoven and Brahms and Handel, and I heard orators that could hold an audience, but most of all, we read the Bible. Mm-hmm. And that powerfully impacted me. Those stories just soaked into me.
And your dad was a professional in sales and pretty adept at it.
My father was the greatest salesman I ever saw. The strange thing about that was it was what he loved. He loved connecting with people, and his primary thing was to connect with them, not to sell them the thing. In fact, he loved for me to go with him, and I loved to go with him. And he would teach me little lessons as we were going in or coming out. Once he had to see a man in a bar in Memphis in the summertime, pickled pig's feet on the bar. I don't know if you've ever seen a Memphis tavern in the summertime. And we walked in there, and the whole place stank of stale beer and who knows what else. And we walked out, and he stopped and leaned down and said, your mama doesn't want me to take you into places like this, but I want you to know if you want to sit around and drink beer in the middle of the day, right there's where you go, and those are the people you'll sit there with. And it was that kind of lesson but he knew the name of the president of the company, and he knew the name of the guy that swept the floors, and he liked him.
But his career hit a wall that impacted you too.
My father had a nervous breakdown when I was about 11, and he lost his job when the company he worked for was sold, and they were going to get rid of all they were going to increase their profitability by getting rid of the higher paid older guys. And my dad was 38.
Wow.
And he had been working full time since he was 14 because he was on his own. And it really crushed him. And he really unraveled. And it was a real crisis. My mother, I know, was terrified in retrospect, but had this amazing courage in this time. We were farmed out to relatives. My sister and I at one point lived in a house with no indoor plumbing.
And give us a sense for just timing in your life for this. Like, when was this? What years was this?
I was 11 years old. It was in the early 1960s.
Got it.
And the strange thing was, as sick with worry as I was about my dad, I was sort of the man in the family at 11. And I found it a really exciting time. I was in 5 different schools in 4 years, fistfights and I was always the outsider, and kind of developed a chip on my shoulder. Tried to practice my father's style of like connect and like people, but sometimes when people are picking on you, you've got to fight back. And
how did that affect your faith? And then kind of the stepping stone to a successful career. How did that, what happened in that you can look back today and said, okay, as difficult as that was, that turned out to be a great benefit for me?
Wow. Well, that's the cornerstone of all of it. We got even more, we leaned even more on faith. We went to church even more. There was a time when we were in Memphis, I added it up once, we'd be in church about 20 hours a week, and we started going more. But it wasn't the churchness of it all. It was prayer and love. And it wasn't even so much like the practice of religion as it was just the having it in your heart and each other.
True faith as opposed to religion.
Relationship.
Yeah. Yes. And I saw my father's comeback. That was the big thing. The falling apart was terrifying, but his response to that would last, still goes for me.
And in your life, there's a parallel of that, but I don't want to jump to that right away. So that education, that background, you really wanted to be a songwriter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Opryland.
Yes.
Ran an animal show in Opryland.
Yeah. Yeah.
So walk us through to how we get from a seminary to a goal to be a songwriter, and then all of a sudden, one of the most notable screenwriters in Hollywood.
I found that I could pick up a guitar and songs would come out. And I found that if I sat down with a piece of paper, like my grandmother had a country store in Tennessee, and when I was 11, there's a pot-bellied stove in the middle and pig feed in the back of the store, stacks of pig feed. And I made a desk of stacks of pig feed, and I wrote stories there when I was 11. And I would read them to my cousins, and they would go, "That's really good." And I just, when other kids would roll their eyes when the teacher would say, "We're going to write a story," I would go, "Great." And then when I was 15 or so, I started playing guitar. And when I went to college, I was in my dorm room nursing a broken heart, and I picked up my guitar and I started writing a song, and I played it at a school coffee house, and people applauded, and I decided to start a little record company. So I never had a fear of failure. And a lot of that attitude was probably from my father, because the last sale he made he worked for Curtis Candy Company. They made Baby Ruths and Butterfingers, and the last sale he had made for them was $90,000 and that was like 1960.
That's a big sale,
that was a big sale. It was a tractor trailer load of candy. The next sale he made in the company he started after that was 90 cents. But he worked his way into enormous success. And so I just wasn't afraid of failure. I thought, even if I fail at starting a record company, I started a record company. Right. And that makes me a lion instead of a sheep. And I did that. And I had some success with that. I met Chris Christopherson. I was at Duke. Sure. And I really admired him. One of the ways I've chosen paths was to look at people that I admired or related to. And Chris Christopherson was a Rhodes Scholar. He was a Golden Gloves boxer, an airborne ranger, and he wrote great songs. And so I thought, this is the kind of guy I want to be myself. And he was doing a concert at my school, and I finagled a way to get backstage and meet him. And I went up to him and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Christopherson," and he was so friendly. Just, he looked me right in the eye, shook my hand, big, strong guy. I said, I write songs. I've started a little record company. I had a little success. My folks want me to be a doctor or a lawyer or something that to rationalize all the sacrifices they had made so I could have an education. And he went, "You've got to go to Nashville." Now, I enjoy this story because here's a life strategy. Ask a total stranger who doesn't know you at all and who is blind drunk at the time for advice, and then take his advice. There's a life strategy. And about that time, I heard that a new theme park was opening called Opryland. And I went down and auditioned for a summer job as a performer. And I finished my audition, and they said, "Are you afraid of animals?" And that's not the response that you fantasize if you've written this song. And I said something like, "Oh, I've dated a bunch of them," or something. and they went, "This is our guy." And they offered me a permanent job as manager of the Barnyard Animal Opry, which was a live show in which trained barnyard animals played musical instruments. So I had a pig that played the piano, and I named him Pigarachi. And I had a duck that played the drum.
That's great.
And the duck I named Bert Back Quack. And 8,000 people a day saw this show. I also had a chimpanzee, and it was
And how
amazing.
long did this run for?
3 years. Well, I ended up leaving after 3 years. I got signed as a staff writer at Nashville's largest country music place. And I skipped over a little piece that I wanted to share in response to your earlier question. When I had majored in religion, I had decided I wanted to do an additional year in seminary. And I was talking with because I really wanted to explore whether the clergy was for me. And I never really felt that I was cut out to be a pastor, but I wanted to live my life for more than satisfying my appetites and my ego. I felt that there was something in this I needed to explore. And the pastor of the church I grew up in said, "Do you feel the call to be a pastor?" And I paused and I said, "Honestly, I don't, but I know it's the greatest calling anyone could ever have." And he said, "You're wrong. The greatest calling you could have is one God has for you."
So good.
And I went to Nashville trying to pursue that. And I got a meeting with one of the great, like legendary publishers in Nashville. His name was Wesley Rose. And I played him my songs. And he said, those are really good songs. They're not country songs. Do you love country music? And I said, well, I respect it. I like it. He said, nah, that's not what I asked you. This might not be the place for you. And I felt really lost.
And that's what led to going to Hollywood or Southern California, Los Angeles for songwriting.
Yes.
Not for acting, not for screenwriting, but for songwriting.
No. For songwriting. And I, first of all, I quit my job. I saved my money. I slept on the floor. I didn't have furniture. But I put all my money into the bank so that I could have the freedom to pursue. I knew if I spent money, that would cost me my dreams.
And I'm sure that was part of how you grew up too. If you grew up, somewhat in poverty or poor, you learned that, hey, save the money. That's going to allow me the freedom to go do the things that I want to pursue.
Yeah. And there's a story about Walt Disney that when he was starting his company, he ate beans for years and years. And he told that story to one of his daughters, and she said, gosh, Daddy, that must have been terrible. And he went, I love beans. I was like, I didn't mind sleeping on the floor. I really didn't. Yeah. I wanted nice things, but more than that, I wanted to be able to do what I dreamed of doing. And when I'd gone to Nashville for that audition, I was lying in a motel room staring at the ceiling the night before, was feeling the nerves and sleepless. And I said a prayer, and my prayer was, maybe this is ego. I don't know if my dreams of doing this are just indulgent ego dreams, or if this is really where I need to be. Because I tried other things that weren't where I needed to be. I tried really hard to be a basketball player. I was in karate. I won tournaments, but
you got a black belt.
I got a black belt. I was an instructor. I loved that, but I didn't. That wasn't my future. And so here I am in Nashville, about to audition for this country music theme park, and my prayer was, if this is not the place for me, then show me, but just help me do my best. Help me not to chicken out. Just give it my all. And here's my promise: 2 things will never hold me back: a lack of effort and a fear of failure.
But you've come to that, Randall, you've come to that prayer a number of times in your life.
Yes.
We would fast forward and maybe get a little bit out of context here. But that similar prayer was before the first time you met Mel Gibson.
Oh, yeah.
Similar prayer as you got into directing.
Yes.
Some of the other pieces to it too. So you've always kind of looked at prayer as reminding you of a very humble, a lot of humility.
Yes. And I've never wanted to be safe.
That's fascinating.
I've always felt that the edge where I was in the dark was where the opportunities were.
Because that pushed you?
I think it kind of pulled me.
Okay.
I was drawn to the mystery. I was drawn to the uncertainty. I had heard a story about a pitcher. Baseball was one of my early sports, and a pitcher named Sudden Sam McDowell. I don't know much about him except that he had a great fastball. And if he struck a guy out with 3 fastballs, the next time the guy came up, he'd throw him 3 curveballs because he knew he could strike him out with fastballs. And that was the way he got his name. Somebody who struck out went back to the dugout, and his buddy said, how's the ball coming up to the plate? And the guy said, all of a sudden. But that kind of thing, like, let me find the thing that I'm not certain about. That pulled me toward, and ultimately, I believe that that all true art, all true science, all true faith is about accepting that we don't know, that there are some things that are unknowable. It's not just we don't know the outcome, we can't know the outcome. It's not in our hands. So trusting God is what's important, not whether I win or lose.
Right.
And that, I would say, is kind of the essence of the William Wallace speech on the battlefield. It's like, we may die.
I very much want to get to Braveheart, but we're still, as a songwriter, how do we then get to Hollywood as a songwriter, but then all of a sudden move in to writing? And your first writing was not for films, it was for television.
Yes. I was, I got to California. I was still writing. I wasn't getting anywhere. But I met a woman, fell in love, and there was a screenplay on her coffee table, just a stack of pages in a binder, like a school binder. And I picked it up and was looking at it, and it was a screenplay that her father had written, a man who would become my father-in-law, about his experiences in World War II. He was a bombardier navigator and was shot down over Germany, and 2 years in a prison camp. And in that prison camp, he was a boxer, and the commandant, or what they called him, the Kriegi commander, the prisoner of war commander, knew he boxed and called him into a secret meeting and said, "We want you to join the Suicide Squad." And he said, "Doesn't sound like an appealing thing.
I'll pass."
And the guy said, "There's 5,000 of us. There are 500 German guards. They're losing. We're bombing where they live. We're bombing their families. One of these days, they're going to come in here with machine guns and kill all of us. And all these guys in this camp are flyers, and they're enormously courageous, but they're not hand-to-hand combat guys. And we need some guys who are willing, when that day comes, to throw their bodies at the guns. And with the 5,000 of us could then maybe overwhelm the guards." And my father-in-law said, "Count me in." And he wrote a screenplay about this. And I read this thing and went, wow, the form just felt like natural to me. I had written novels, I had written short stories, and it just didn't feel like who I was. But I decided
you've written 7 books that have found themselves on the New York Times bestseller.
Yeah, I've written but the screenplay just felt like, here I am.
That was you.
That was me. And I decided to try it. And from like the first half page, it was starting to flow. And I got an agent off of that, and then ended up with a job with a man named Stephen Cannell, who wrote A-Team. He became my mentor.
Did Rockford Files, some other ones?
Yes. He was a genius.
Yeah.
And he really mentored me. And then his company, we had a writer's strike. So I went from having no money to, well, I like to talk numbers, but the first year I made $100,000, and that was the most money. That was mind-boggling money to me. And the next year my pay doubled, and the next year it doubled again, and the next year it doubled again. And
so in the space of a year, I think you said before, you went from basically walking in the door to being on the executive producer side.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty rapid rise.
It was rapid rise. And I had married the woman whose father wrote the screenplay, and we had a son on the way. And the Writers Guild went out on strike, and I had a long-term contract that guaranteed me a lot of money for the next 3 years into the future. So because we had boys on the way, we bought a beautiful home and spent our savings remodeling it. And suddenly there's a writer's strike, and the company was able to do a suspend and extend on the contracts.
And the relationship with Steve had changed by this point too.
It changed by that time. Yeah. You know, the mentor-protege relationship is a complicated one. And when I started to have a mind of my own about how I wanted to do it, it sort of felt like, well, if I want to go this way and he wants to get his name's on the building, I owe it to him to leave. Mm-hmm. I owe it to him not to butt heads with him. And, to this day, I'm beyond grateful for everything he taught me. But his company started to sort of stagger and change. The writer's strike went on, and all of our money was already spent on the house because I thought, well, it's easy. I can spend my savings. Well, it's like one of my sons who's majored in economics says the most expensive words ever are while you're at it. So we're remodeling the house. While you're at it, let's just put in this and put in that. And so we had this beautiful home and German cars in the driveway and swimming pool and a tennis court, and the boys were in private school. And suddenly, all my money was gone, and there were no prospects for employment. When
you really hearken back to your father's experience of successful, and then all of a sudden that ends. Where do I go? What do I do?
Yes.
In his case, it ended up in a breakdown.
Yeah. Yeah. I had seen my father had a nervous breakdown when I was the same age as my oldest son.
Same age.
And I was terrified that I was going to do the same thing to them. And I had always been able to work my way out of problems. I would just double down on the work and double down on the work. And I found I couldn't work. I was knotted up and my hands were shaking and I couldn't eat and I couldn't sleep. And then I got scared.
So you go to Scotland and you're on some of this journey.
And this is 10 years before now when you visit Scotland?
Yeah, I'd gone to Scotland.
You'd gone to Scotland. So then what made you so fascinated by the Wallace story? What drew you in to kind of that thematic ideal?
The woman I married had Mormon ancestors. And she had a strange situation because her mother was LDS, Latter-day Saint, and her dad was Irish Catholic. And when they got married, both sides of the family refused to come to the wedding unless the wedding was held in their house of worship.
Right.
And at that point, they just said, heck with all of you, and they never practiced anything. And except a funeral, they would, at a funeral, they would go to the church to bury somebody, but they had nothing to do with it. And, but because of the Mormon ancestry, they knew all of their ancestors for years and years and years, but I knew none of mine because my father's father had died, and I didn't know where Wallace's were, but there was a poem that I had read in school by Robert Burns called "Scots Which Have With Wallace Bled," and I thought there must be Wallaces in Scotland. So the woman I married had said, "Look, I'm not really eager to be a mother, but I'll make you a deal. If you get me pregnant, then you have to take me to Europe." And I went, deal. So she was expecting our first son, and we went traveling, and we were in London. And I said, let's run up to Scotland and just poke around.
Sure.
I mean, that is not like the most organized plan, but okay, let's go poke around. And we go to Edinburgh, which is such a gorgeous city.
Wonderful. Yeah.
And the Castle Mount there, and we're going up to the castle, and we're walking in, and there's the entrance to Edinburgh Castle, and there's a statue of William Wallace on one side and Robert the Bruce on the other.
Probably known as the greatest Scottish king.
Yes, yes. And that speech, "Scots Which Have With Wallace Bled," was written, Robert Burns was trying to recapture what Robert the Bruce had said to the Scots. So I asked a member of the Black Watch there, this tough guy in a kilt, he was about 5 feet tall and looked like he could run through a wall, who is this Wallace? And he said, "Our greatest hero." And I'm elbowing the pregnant wife going, "Greatest hero? Wallace, greatest hero?"
Wallace.
And so I said to him, "I know the history of Robert the Bruce. I know he's your greatest king. So he and Wallace must have been allies in fighting the English." And he said the magic words for any writer. He said, "No one will ever know for sure. But our legends say that Robert the Bruce may have been one of those who betrayed William Wallace to clear the way for himself to be the king." And I'll tell you, that was lightning striking. I really felt like
there was the story.
It was as if I had been told that Judas and St. Peter were the same person. I thought, what if there was something so noble in the way William Wallace lived and died that was what transformed Robert the Bruce from a man who would betray his country's greatest hero into a man who could become its greatest.
And all of your works, transformation is a key pice of that. That's inserted in all of your works somewhere along the way. Fair?
It is the thing that fascinates me the most of all, that we can say, I have a friend whose father was head of the Gambino family. He was, my friend has passed away now, rest in peace, but his father was head of the mafia. And he and I would talk, and he was a wonderful human being. My friend was highly principled, but you did not want to cross him. Revenge was his main religion, but his belief was that people don't change. He said, if a guy was a lying, coward when he was 4 years old, he's that way when he's 64. But but life has these stories. And we all find it in ourselves where there's a turning point. And I've been fascinated with what was the agent of change? What happened at the moment that you were transformed? And that really, really fascinated me about Robert the Bruce and William Wallace.
So how did we go from, so you're there, you see the two statues, Wallace is recalled. Wallace is a pretty familiar name to you.
Yes.
So how did, from that point, then walk us through kind of the overnight success that took a decade.
That took a decade.
That got to the point of a screenplay that changed your life.
Yes. The landmark moment was when I'm knotted up and I can't write. And I'm afraid that I'm going to do the same things to my sons that happened with me. And the only place I could go was on my knees. I had no other place to go.
And specifically, what are you praying for at this moment?
I said to God, what really matters to me right now is my sons. What happens to them? My wife was tough. I mean, she was the daughter of the guy that had been in the prison camp. Yeah. She was tough, and she would be all right no matter what happened. She didn't want to see everything go to hell in a handbasket, but she was tough. But I didn't want my sons to see me in the same state I had seen my father in. And so I said to God, if what is best for my sons is that they not grow up in this house with 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms and a tennis court and a swimming pool and German cars in the driveway, if they'd be better men if they grew up in a little house with no indoor plumbing, and that would make them better and stronger, then please, let's do that. Bring that on. But help me bear it. Just help me bear it. But if I go down in this fight, let me go down not on my knees to Hollywood, but standing up and fighting for what I believe with my flag flying. Let me do that.
Not unlike William Wallace in the Braveheart.
Exactly. Without that prayer, I could have never written William Wallace. I had to be there to know the moment.
But at that point, you had already taken several drafts, multiple drafts, at Braveheart up to that point, right?
Actually, I had not. I had been writing an epic historical story about the foundation of America. I was called Love and Honor. Mm-hmm.
And that was actually the first screenplay that you sold, correct?
Yes, that's right. Exactly. I had been working on that for years. I was fascinated with the notion of American farmers standing up against the most powerful army in the world. Like, what was that about? And I was working on that story. And that was the story that I began to write when I got up off my knees. And I sold that, and the company that bought it or that bid on it but couldn't buy it because they didn't have enough money, they said to me, "We want your next 2 stories sight unseen. Do you have anything else?" And I said, "Well, there's a story about a guy named William Wallace." And it was Sidney Pollock's daughter, whose name is Rebecca Pollock Parker. She's married now. And Sidney Pollock was one of my favorite, had made some of my favorite movies. And I told her the story of William Wallace in about 10 minutes. And she went, "Go write that." And I said, "Do you want to outline the treatment?" And she went, "Go write it." And I sat down and wrote Braveheart.
But you had done a lot of work up to that point, at least in your mind, on Braveheart.
Yes.
And what's fascinating to me is you went from this kind of myth you had heard to writing at least the initial draft of it with literally no research?
No, none. And there was...
Why?
A couple of reasons. One is the why is what tells you the how. And if you do research, if you think, I don't know enough about this to write about it, you wouldn't want to write about it unless something had called to you. If you knew enough to be drawn to that story, it was that piece of you that was drawn that would inform you about how to tell the story, why to keep that in. But if you said, "I need to know more," your awareness of your ignorance increases with your research. You're like, "I've got to read a book before I write this." Then you read that book and you say, "I need to read 5 books because I don't know." Then I need to read 10. And then you want to put all that research into the story and you lose the heart of what called you in the first place.
And you've got enormous freedom to write the story however you see it playing out in your mind.
Right, exactly right. And there was no research on William Wallace to do. So I wrote a draft of the story and the things that I imagined. Like I knew there had to be a moment when William Wallace is on a battlefield and they're outnumbered.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, and when I write a story, I am all the characters.
So you play each of the characters in your mind and you can see it all coming together in a single scene.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, and the fact is, I think all the characters are in all of us. People would say to me, "Well, do you see yourself as William Wallace?" And I want to. I want to be the guy that knows I'm going to love this guy and I'm going to cut this guy's head off. But I don't often know that. All too often, I'm Robert the Bruce going, "Well, let's see, how should I calculate this?" We all are, and I'm the coward on the battlefield. All of that is in me, and I wrote the initial drafts, and then I found an ancient book that was hundreds of years old.
And this is after you've got a draft of
done.
Yes. And there were things in that book that I thought I had invented. There were moments, like in my screenplay was a moment where William Wallace runs into Robert the Bruce on the battlefield, and he's horrified that the man he tried to redeem.
Yeah, because he was next to the king.
Next to the king. And I had written that.
King of England.
And when I came across that in the book, my hands were,
because you had already written that story.
I was trembling, yes. Now, I can tell you this too. I didn't know that there was a legend that William Wallace's wife had been killed because of his rebellion. That was the only part of the legend that came down, that maybe this had happened. So I'm writing the story, and the initial thing I'd heard that his father and brother had been killed fighting the English. Didn't know when, didn't know how, but I wanted to start the story there. So I'm writing the story, and the story is telling itself to me. All my sons are writers. One of them says, the greatest thing about being a writer is that you're the initial audience of the story. That you're not pushing the story forward. The story, or sometimes you are, you're just trying to find it. But when the story starts telling itself to you, that's when it's coming alive. And I was at this point in the story, very early, I mean, like page 5, is here's a boy standing at a grave. His father and his brother are in that grave. His mother died long ago. He's alone. All the neighbors know if you put your hand on that boy, you're going to have to keep him. And they don't want to. And he's standing there, and it's unbearable to me. And I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I'm looking at this story. I'm feeling it unfold, and I think somebody's got to comfort him. But I'm waiting for someone to do it in my head, and nobody can do it. And I thought it would be a child. And then it would be a girl. And she would want to give him something. What would she have to give him? Because she wouldn't bring it. She picks up a flower.
Before the uncle.
Yeah.
And she gives him a flower, and I wept. And then I know that...
You wept as you saw it in your mind.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It tore my heart out. And then I have him come back, and he's looking for her, and he sees her, and he asks her to go for a ride, and he takes her on a ride, and they get back from their Highland date, and he wants to kiss her, and she wants him to kiss her, but he can't kind of bring himself to close the distance. An experience that I think most every man has had.
Uh-huh.
And she's waiting, and he can't do it, so she starts to turn away. And I'm writing this, wondering what's going to happen. And I'm almost screaming at the page, just kiss her, just kiss her. But I can't bring myself to write that because it doesn't feel like what he would do. And she starts to turn away, and I wrote, he grabs her hand. And I thought, why did he grab her hand? And I didn't know. He's brought some, he has something to give her. So he gives her something. And I didn't know what he gave her. He hands her something, a gift. And then he turns away, and she opens it, and it was the flower. And I wept again. And then I get to the end of the story, and I'm writing that the axe is falling toward it, and his head, he's being executed. Mm-hmm. And I think,
disemboweled, racked.
Yes. Tortured in the worst ways that they could think of. And I think, okay.
And that's very factual.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've been to the spot where it happened. The spot where it happened was like the butcher area where they slaughtered cattle. And they slaughtered him like cattle. And I'm writing this moment. It still moves me. And I knew that I couldn't show the audience the axe hit his throat. So I paused and thought, well, what could the audience see at this spot? And I thought, well, let's be with him in the last moment of his life. What would he do? And, he sees the axe coming, and I thought, well, he knows his friends are there, so he would look to his friends. Yeah. And I wrote, in the last moment of his life, William Wallace turns his eyes to his friends. And it wasn't until then that I knew she was there.
And she appeared. So she appears with his two friends, and that's the climactic scene.
Yeah, and I wept again.
That old book that you had was 200 years plus. Interesting story, how you get it. We'll jump over that. But you looked at it kind of after the fact.
Yes.
And found some interesting correlations.
So that book, I had been asked by the guys that were doing the electronic press kit during the movie when I was on the set at the battlefield. Yeah. And they said to me, oh, you must have done a lot of research. And I said, yeah, I read the New Testament. But they didn't want to put that in the electronic press kit. But Mel Gibson recognized it exactly. Oh, this is the Garden of Gethsemane. Oh, this is, I mean, he saw it instantly. Yeah. Nobody else did, but he did, and I did. So
transformation, principle, sacrifice, freedom.
Absolutely. And so I said, well, there was this one old book that I found. And so they called me like 2 years later, the movie's about to come out, and they said, can we come to your house and film you with this book. It'll be a good shot for the electronic press kit. This ancient book. The pages almost 300 years old, right?
Falling apart.
And so I said, yeah, I still have the book, and I took the book out of my drawer, went up to a restaurant on the boulevard, and was having lunch and looking through it to pick a passage to read for them. The book has a prologue of like 30 pages, and then the epic poem starts that tells the story of William Wallace. So there was an inscription between the prologue and the poem. So the inscription wasn't on page 1. The inscription was on like page 30, handwritten.
So you hadn't seen it to this point?
I had not ever read it because I was so enthralled by the book. I had skipped over the scribble there. But suddenly, now for the first time, I look at this scribble, and it says, "This gift is the book of Lindsay Dove to the Tuttles, London, May 24th, 1795. And I saw that and I went, it's 1995. 200 years to the year ago, when the book was 70 years old at that time, someone in London said to someone else, don't forget this story. Yeah. Here's this book. Don't forget this.
And the movie was released on what day?
It was released in 1995, and May 24th was the weekend the movie came out.
You mentioned Mel Gibson a couple of times.
Day.
So clearly accomplished. You've been in Hollywood. You've written, so people know you. But this is the first screenplay that's going to go. Mel Gibson at that time is
biggest star in the world.
Biggest star. Okay, I was going to say 1 to 5, but somewhere in there.
No, biggest in the world.
Biggest star. So how in the world does a screenwriter who's never put anything on screen end up with Mel Gibson? And Mel Gibson not only being the lead actor, becomes best actor, also becomes director, becomes best director in 1995. How did you pull that off?
Yeah. So, first of all, the screenwriting courses, screenwriting schools, and most everybody in the business, the conventional wisdom of the business is ask what the buyers want to buy and then give it to them. Yeah. And that would seem like a logical thing. And I think it's dead wrong.
William Wallace doesn't get the girl and he doesn't live.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There would have been a thought by people that, you don't want the hero to get disemboweled and castrated and beheaded and but my thought was, if I don't feel inspired, no one else is going to. So in this day of everybody's trying to write Lethal Weapon 4, I write about a guy running around the Highlands. But the alchemy in that is that actors, great actors, not the cowards, the great ones, want something that challenges them to do something they've never done. They want to do what I just described about. They want to find the mystery. They want to step in onto the edge, and no one more than Mel Gibson. I had given the screenplay to my agent, and he had read it, and he walked into Mel Gibson's agent and said, "I'm just warning you, if you don't show this to Mel, someday he's going to look at you and go, you had this on your desk and you didn't show it to me. You need to look at this." And he did, and he sent it to Mel.
And just to interject, there was another pretty popular actor that later did find out he was never offered, that then came back at you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And finally, someone in Mel's office got through the stack of scripts and hit Braveheart and said to Mel, "This is the one." And he read it, and I got a phone call from my agent saying, "Are you sitting down?" And no. He said, "Well, you should sit down. Mel Gibson wants to have breakfast with you tomorrow." And having worked with Pigarachi the pig and Bert
And the
Bacharach the duck,
The
I was used to chaos, and I wasn't afraid to. I mean, he's a human being. It's not like, but I knew that the danger was not from him. The danger was from me. The danger was that I would fall into that kind of valence that happens when you're around a celebrity, when everybody's like, everyone wants to figure out what does the king want and let's give it to him.
Mm-hmm.
But when you do that,
you compromise to get the prize.
But you learned that early on with your no fear attitude. Yeah. Like it was built in you from the foundational parts of your life.
I think it was. It's like one thing my father never did, no matter how bad it was, he never lied. He never did something with a customer. He would say to me, if our customers don't prosper, we'll starve, and we should. It's our job to help them prosper. And my job was to help him prosper. Mm-hmm. So we're sitting around the table, and the most powerful people in Hollywood were there, like 4 or 5 of them, and Mel Gibson and me. And I had walked around the neighborhood the night before, and I had prayed sincerely not to kiss his butt. I mean, that was my prayer. Please don't let me get into this thing where I'm just trying to say what he wants to hear, what I think he wants to hear. And we sit down, and everybody's scared. And I leaned across the table, and I put my fist on the table, and I said, listen, here's how it is. Hollywood movies have a message. Everyone does, whether they want to or not. They have a message. And the message of most is the guy with the cutest dimples, the biggest biceps, the greenest money, he gets the girl. Yeah. The message of this movie is if you're faithful to your heart, even if they cut it out of your chest, you prevail. That's the movie I want my sons to see. You want to make that movie, I'm your man. You don't want to make that movie, you need to say no. And all these people around the table went, oh, gee, look at the time. But Mel leaned forward, and I went, he's in. And nobody else looks at me the rest of the meeting. They acted like I smelled, and we all go out and get the cars. Nobody's saying anything. I'm driving away, my cell phone rings, and my agent goes, what the heck did you say? And I start to, well, somebody had to say something. And he went, no. The head of the studio just called, and he said he wants to double your deal, and he wants the next movie you write for him to be the director.
But the film itself, Braveheart, we think of it as a great success today. We saw 10 nominations, 5 Academy Awards, $300 million plus in terms of the gross of it. But it's the only film I know of that's actually been pulled from theaters twice for non-performance.
Twice. Yes.
Tell us about that story.
Well, Mel was insistent that the movie be long, not too long, but he didn't want to trim it and make it a 110-minute movie. He wanted to have its fullness, and so the opening weekend numbers, their whole algorithm is, well, if you open at 50 million. Then your next weekend will be 45. But if you open at 10, even if the next weekend is 9 and you have a drop, but you just can't make up the numbers. And with a running time of almost 3 hours, you instead of getting 4 screenings a night, you get 2. So we opened it, Braveheart opened in like 4th or 5th place. And the studio believed it was a great movie. The audience responses were there, but it was not doing anything. So they pulled it, and then they came out again right I think in December or late November, and it did another few $1 million, but not a lot. But then it won all the Oscars, and then suddenly it was just
took off. Yeah. With all the movies, I wish we had all the time to go through it. We don't, unfortunately. Where do you want us to go?
We Were Soldiers. Give us the kind of history. What got you into it? What pulled you into it? Why'd you do it? What resonated with you? And kind of, the thematic approach to all your screenplays. How'd that one come to life?
So I was sitting in my office. It was while Braveheart was in production, and no one knew whether Braveheart was going to be a hit or not. In fact, the studio, people who were at the studio have written books and said things like how much they believed in it. But the studio actually sold the international rights to Braveheart for $5 million and thereby gave away about $400 million.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That's how much they believed in it. They were, uncertain.
Right.
We don't know if Braveheart's going to be a colossal failure or not. But I got a phone call. I'm sitting in my office, and it was a studio executive who I adore from Warner Brothers at that time. And she said, I nearly lost my job over this Braveheart thing because we're supposed to keep track of Mel Gibson, but we didn't know Braveheart was coming. I thought, well, I'm sorry, Becky Pollock bought it, and what was I supposed to do? And she said, well, Kevin Costner has read it, and he wishes he had seen it, and we'd like to fly you to Hawaii to have a meeting with him and just pitch him ideas. Well, that's fun. So I went to a bookstore just to get a book to read on the plane, and I saw the cover of a book that showed a young lieutenant in Vietnam walking into the bush with fixed bayonets. And that grabbed me. Like when the command fixed bayonets is when, as they say, the metal meets the meat. And I picked that book up, and it had a beautiful title, We Were Soldiers Once and Young. And I opened it up on my way across the Pacific to Hawaii. It was being Kevin was shooting a movie called Waterworld, which was on the Big Island, and then the preface of the book, it said, Hollywood has gotten the story of the Vietnam veteran wrong every damn time, whetting the knives of twisted politics on the bones of our dead brothers.
And that was written by Lieutenant General at that time, Moore, but Colonel Moore.
Yes. And I went, wow. And I started to read that book, and in the passage that particularly moved me was a letter by a woman named Barbara Gagan, whose husband had been killed in the battle, and she had described Hal Moore coming to visit her afterwards, and that she had taken him to the grave of her husband, and she stayed in the car to give Hal the moment he wanted alone at the grave of her husband, and that she saw his shoulder shaking, saw him weeping. And I was so moved by that story. I got off the plane and I called my agent, went to a payphone. It didn't even have a cell phone then, and called my agent and said, I don't know who owns the movie rights. You tell him I'll kill a relative if I can be the screenwriter of that. And he said, I'll get right back to you. 2 days later, he called and said, the guys won't sell the movie rights because they're afraid that Hollywood will pervert their story. So give me their number. And I called them and I said, you've never heard of me. My name's Randall Wallace. I've written a story called Braveheart, which you've never heard of yet either. But Mel Gibson's making it right now. I will send you the screenplay and read it. And if you like it, great. If you don't, no harm. And they read it and they called and said, okay, let's talk. And I said, all right, I can get a studio based on the momentum that Braveheart had at the time to give you money. But no matter what they tell you, they will control the future. I will pay you my own money. I took, and by the way, for Braveheart, I got scale. I got the minimum amount that they can pay you is what I got for writing Braveheart. Got no bonus. Got no bonus. It's like, thanks very much, but I got the minimum. But for Pearl Harbor, I'd set a record.
Pearl Harbor
was right after that. But for this, I had a little money, and I said, I'll give you, if you sell me the screen rights, then I'll make you a deal that in success you'll make more money than you would have made on a studio deal. But you have to believe in me at this point. And if you don't like what I write, you'll know who to come shoot.
How did you make this work, though? Braveheart, part of the deal of getting Gibson as the actor was allowing him to direct it because he wanted to be a director at that point, didn't
Yes.
have much of a background or
No,
much of a
that's
resume
right.
on it. But then you did We Were Soldiers.
Mhm.
He was the star, but not the director.
Right.
Right. There had been a moment in the making of Braveheart. It was the scene when William Wallace meets the princess for the first time, and there was a problem in the scene. And I'm a first-time director. I'm just trying not to stumble over a light and ruin a moment. I've literally I don't know anything about what I'm doing, and I'm waiting around, and they're shooting a scene in a tent, and it was very tight in the tent, and I heard Randall, where's Randall? And guys are running around looking, and I go, I'm Randall, and they go, Mel needs you, and went in, and he said, there's a problem. The actress is having trouble with the scene, and I don't know what's wrong, and maybe we need to rewrite the thing. And I'm like, oh man, this is a problem. Well, what's happening? He said, well, she gets halfway through and she just stops. It's like it's not working. So I said, okay, well, let's do another one. Let me see it. And they started again, and he went. Now all the cameras were on her. We were shooting her close-ups. None of the cameras were on Mel, but actors do what off-camera dialogue. He's standing there so that she's looking at him, but the cameras are strictly close-up on her, and she would get halfway through and stop, and she did it again, and he turned around and looked at me and said, "What's going on?" And I said, "It's you," and he went, "It's me. I'm not even on camera." And I said, "No, she's looking at you. And you are looking at her like, what is wrong with you? You're not being William Wallace. She needs you to be William Wallace." And he went, got it. And he walked in, and he just lit up like all of his lines he was saying and she just delivered the most incredible performance, and got to the end of the thing, and he looked at me and he went, and then like a couple of days later, he said, "You want to direct something? I'll be in it."
Wow.
That's how.
Is
that what gave you also the empowerment? Again, screenwriter, but screenwriting, that's kind of a lonely field.
Yes.
Directing, all of a sudden, you're balancing some egos that may be as large as anywhere on this planet. That seems like just a big jump to go from screenwriting to taking on director with really nothing in between.
Yes, it is. There's the similarity that it's a creative endeavor, but the drastic difference is that writing is a uniquely solitary pursuit, and directing is to get the best out of everyone, and I love it. And I was particularly blessed to get to direct a movie about one of the greatest leaders who ever lived, Hal Moore. And my father's principles of make sure you see everybody. Like when I direct a movie, I start the day walking around saying hello to everybody on the set, making sure I make eye contact.
It's called leadership, not direction.
Oh man, but it's amazing how few people do it.
I agree. Absolutely.
And with We Were Soldiers, I started with rounding everybody up at the start of every day and telling them what we were doing and why we were doing it. Just at only a few minutes, but this is what we're after. This is the feeling we want, so that they would really understand, not only that they would think was their movie, but they would know it was their movie, that they had ownership of what would happen. And at the end of the day, I would circle everybody up. And part of this too was we were dealing with things that could kill you. We were dealing with explosions and helicopters, and Hal was such an inspiration. And Hal Moore visited the set one day, and he wrote a letter to the guys who cleaned the toilets, and the letter said, "These are the cleanest toilets I've ever seen. They smelled great. They were pleasant to use. And because you're doing your job so well, everybody on this movie is doing their job better, and you're making the movie. And I got that letter. We Xeroxed it and put it in the pay packets of everybody on the set. Like, this is how we are to work on this.
That's right.
So
That's true.
I've always directed
Randall,
that
you've
way.
had you've written some individual passages. Clearly, the movies have been enormously successful. But the Battle of Stirling, when Mel Gibson basically, and I won't even try to paraphrase it, but you can leave. This is the hill I'm going to stand on. There was a line in We Were Soldiers. At the end of the battle, he looks at the journalist who was the co-author of the book and says, I'll never forgive myself.
Right.
I'll never forgive myself because my men died and I didn't. Powerful.
Yeah. And he meant it. When we were, I haven't told this story publicly, we were at the end of the movie, or at the end of the process of making the movie. I was at Hal's home in Colorado, and he was cooking hamburgers, and his wife was in making salad, and it's just me and Hal, and those are really sacred moments. You don't get a lot of those, and I said to Hal, General, because he was a general by that point. You've given your last full measure of service to your men. You promised you'd get them all home, dead or alive, and you did. And you wrote the book, and you dedicated the profits to their descendants so that their kids could have educations, dead or alive. That you had an educational fund. In fact, part of my deal to them when we closed the deal of what they would get, I added, and we will fully fund your educational fund. You did that for your men.
That day, 72 out of 395 in that first battalion died, right?
Right. That's right. And now we've made the movie, and we've made it right. And we put the names of all those men at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
I hope you're able to be at peace. I hope you're able to feel now you've given your last full measure of service to your men, and you've done it. And he looked at me with fury. His eyes flamed, and he said, "Why would I ever want to feel that?" It's like, don't ever tell me I've done enough. It's like, whoa. It's not a principle of leadership. It was his heart.
That's what I believe.
His heart had a hunger that couldn't be satisfied for those men. Sorry, I get emotional.
No, you're good. It's great.
I got to tell you, that's
yeah, it's incredible.
I think, Randall, that's what's made you great.
It's I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it any other way. I could so.
And in a lot of ways, true to your faith, the movie The Resurrection that is, in works, in process. Talk to us about that. How did that all start? Where did Mel come back to you? You go to Mel? Where did all that begin?
All right, so I can tell you nothing about it, and I can tell you everything. There is no story. I dare anyone to come up with an assertion that there is a bigger story to tell than the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
There's a writer named N.T. Wright who says, if you don't think the resurrection is preposterous, you've missed the point. It's that. Mm-hmm. So I have been fascinated with the resurrection since I was a boy. When you come to that part of the story, that's the part that the gospel writers found mysterious. And the notion that here are these common people, these disciples, fishermen, tax collectors, prostitutes, tavern owners, and they followed this man Jesus, and they believed in him. And now he's gone, and they're terrified. And 3 days later, it doesn't matter what you do to them, they will not stop saying they've seen him alive.
Yeah.
Now, you can explain that any way you want to, but I don't know how you explain it except to say, this blew
I'm with you.
their minds, right? And I've had friends, I started a church at home, a home church for a while, and I invited a bunch of friends who, all of whom believed differently. Just let's get together and let's have a church. And we would just talk about what we believed in and why we believed it. And one of my friends, who's an incredible man, an incredible life of service, said, I don't believe Jesus said, I am the way. And I said, I know he said the way. I can prove he said the way, because if he had said, I am a way, no one would have cared.
Right.
They crucified him because he said, I am the way. Now, we can argue about what the way means. Right. I love what C.S. Lewis said of, we know we're only saved through Christ. We just don't know all the ways that Christ saves. So I love that way of looking. But the resurrection fascinated me, and I studied it. It was my primary study when I was at Duke, both in undergraduate and as a graduate student. So Mel had directed Hacksaw Ridge. I had been offered that job to direct, and I'd rewritten the script. When the script came to me, it was called The CO, and I thought that was a terrible title for a conscientious objector. But The CO, what's that? Hacksaw Ridge, that's a good title. And I rewrote it, and then I had the chance to direct Heaven is for Real, and that movie was already ready to go. Yeah. So I said to the guys, I'd love to stay with Hacksaw Ridge, but I think Mel Gibson would be a perfect director. It turned out they had already gone to him and he had turned it down before they came to me, but they hadn't told me that. It's kind of like, somebody proposes to you because they had already proposed to your sister. And your sister wouldn't have him.
Yeah, but you could say you gave him his real lead, his real opening to be a director.
Yeah, yes. And the Hacksaw Ridge was, he was magnificent, doing that. He read my rewrite, and then he signed on, and then and I ended up with no screen credit on that movie.
Yeah, that's right.
But I wanted to go with him for the promotion of the movie. Now, Mel is a devout Catholic, right, but we were going to go to a lot of Protestant churches to promote the movie, and some of which were Pentecostal. And the Holy Spirit thing I love. I didn't grow up Pentecostal, but some of my best friends are, and I wanted to go with him, but I knew it was alien to him, so I went with him on the promotion, and Pentecostal churches were really alien for him. And we were having dinner one night, just the two of us in Dallas. And I said, the thing we need to do is the resurrection, because the passion. Now it's an interesting thing. Catholic friends have said, and I don't want to over characterize anyone's particular practice, but in Catholicism, there's much more emphasis on the crucifixion, on the passion. One Catholic friend of mine said, we almost never talk about the resurrection, and a crucifix for a Catholic, Jesus is on the cross. For a Protestant, it's Christ has risen. He's off the cross. And we need to tell that story. And he got really quiet for a moment. And I knew he was like, and Mel is absolutely brilliant. And I knew he was listening really intently. And I said, I'll write a screenplay, give it to you. We'll write it together. You do whatever you want to do, but we need to get going with this. This is the Mount Everest of all stories. And he got quiet again, and he said, I'm going to have a mass said for you because Satan's going to come after you. Mm. And I said, Mel, Satan has so many Baptists, he doesn't care about them. It's just like, he's got all the Baptists he wants. What about you? And we need to pray for you. And now it's beautiful when somebody wants to have a mass said for you. But I said, but he knew that it was the greatest challenge you could really take on. And it's a testament to him that it was the challenge, the danger, and one of the things he said to me was, this can't be for the money. It can't be to prove anything to anybody. Is this, our hearts have to be pure. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, for all the other things, and he and I have had some amazing conversations down through the years. Now, I knew at that moment how dedicated he was and that this was really going to be a ride. And the thing that I can tell you about it is that it's going to be unlike anything anyone has ever seen. It will be a movie that will be mind-blowing. It may be something that is disturbing and haunting, but it will be unforgettable.
Incredible.
How's that for a movie trailer?
Yeah, it's a great one. We talked about it earlier, but maybe the good way to close on this, Randall, is all of the work that you've done, screenwriter, director, etc. And we talked about the songwriting up front. We should point out that you've done some songwriting after the fact on some of your movies. Mansions of the Lord was in We Were Soldiers,
yes.
And it was also at the funeral of Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
I think Nancy Reagan specifically requested that be included. So you've done some songwriting too. In all of that work, there's a consistency of a faithfulness to your faith and this common message of transformation, of sacrifice, forgiveness to an extent, and love. Is that a fair summation of the overall messages that you're trying to convey in your work?
Yes. And, it's a strange thing. People will say to me, why do you do war stories? And I always say, I don't. I do love stories. What do you love enough to give your life for? When you know that, then you begin to live.
Which is the message of Christ.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly that. And there's a hymn that was sort of a modern Christian hymn of I lean not on my own understanding. I don't believe my own dogma. I don't believe in dogma. It's Karl Barth, the great theologian, that said, religion is humanity's way to God, and it's always erroneous. Revelation is God's way to humanity, and it's always perfect. So
the only religion where God came down
yes,
to earth, to us.
Yes, exactly. And so I love the teachings that I've heard. It was a rabbi who said, if we don't see God in other people, how can we expect them to see God in us? And it's just, I feel it's not my place to try to argue somebody into my understanding. I mean, look, I love to argue. I love to discuss the finer points of theology. Mm-hmm. They got nothing to do with real living. I mean, my feeling is it's kind of easy for me to love because I've been surrounded by it. When I was a child, I had asthma so bad I would die if I panicked, and my grandmother would hold me upright all night long and look at my eyes and sing to me and tell me stories to keep me breathing. And it was so much love. And my parents loved me, and I'm surrounded by love. But I think, what about the person who instead of being hugged and held, was hit and hated, and you tell them God is love? They look at you like, well, what is love? And when you find real love in your life and you think, I didn't know this existed. I didn't know this is what it felt like. I believe that's what Jesus brought to people, that Jesus came to relieve us of shame and guilt and say, you don't deserve it. One of the conversations I had with Mel was, he said, he was saying, I have so many things that I need to work on as a human being. I mean, he searches his soul. And I said, we've got this hymn called Just As I Am. Mm-hmm. We don't deserve God's love. We will not ever. God loves us while we were yet sinners, and accept it and rejoice in it. And that is what I get to do when I get to meet someone like Hal Moore or William Wallace or Penny Chinnery, who owns Secretariat, or Todd Burpo, whose son was near death and came back and started talking about heaven. Like to celebrate those things. Mm-hmm. Not just I had a time when, a few years ago, the doctors had decided they were going to amputate my hand. And a doctor figured out he wouldn't quit, and he saved my hand. And I decided I wasn't going to just do hand exercises. I was going to celebrate that I have a hand. And that's the way I want to live life.
And when you pray,
hands up.
Yes, that's exactly right. And oddly, I found in Rome that the earliest churches, there was a church in Rome that was like one of the first churches. Probably the book of Romans was read in that very spot. And they didn't pray like that. They prayed like that. And since then I've prayed like that.
Randall, I want to thank you so much for the individuals that will listen to this, and I know most will be listening. What they will miss, but I hope that they can see it in your words and in your voice, is the amount of times when the emotion, the tears came through. Because Kyle and I got a chance to see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's really special.
Yeah, thank you. I laugh a lot, but I'm not afraid to feel it. And Jimmy Valvano, the coach,
mm-hmm. Absolutely,
no on stage, he said, every day laugh and every day cry, and every day tell somebody you love them.
Don't forget the last one. Randall, thank you so much.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching today's episode. Again, today's episode is sponsored by Clay Cooley Automotive, a family-owned, family-operated automotive company serving the local DFW Metroplex for over 22 years.